Welcome in everybody to Across the Pod, an FPL podcast. The Fantasy Premier League is exploding and I am so excited to finally dive in. I am your host, Jordan Richards. I will be joined by my co-host, Tom, who has been in FPL and doing extremely well for years. And he's going to teach me everything I need to know about FPL. We are going to get on this journey together. We started this podcast and we are so excited for this season. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, to the podcast feed as we embark on this incredible journey. Episode 1 is us building our joint team. We have our individual teams. We've talked some strategy. We talked some players, who we want, who we don't want. Check it out. Let us know what you think. So strap in and let's get started right now. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy JRich, back for another FPL podcast with my main man Tom. It is Sunday, August the 11th, and today we are going to build our joint team. How we're going to do it, I don't know. We both haven't even finalized our own teams, but we're here to give you guys a few things of what we're looking at beyond simply the players we like, our personal biases. Who are the players we want to put in our lineup, and who are the guys that we're targeting? Tom, is there anything you want to get into before we start, or just want to hop straight into the team?
Well, JRich, firstly, let me say you're looking absolutely glorious. You're matching this beautiful sunny weather we have on the other side of the pond in London. I'm slightly sunburnt, but feeling excited to be here. Even more excited for us to kind of build out this team for this upcoming Fantasy Premier League season. And I think before we get into it, for anyone new to FPL watching, this is a really good opportunity to get a sense of the thought process behind picking your team, hopefully help you with some of those key decisions. And I imagine we're going to argue about those, JRich, throughout. Also, if you're lazy and you just want to copy our team every week to win your leagues and do well, feel free to skip the absolute waffle that's probably going to be in the next 20 to 30 minutes. Just go to the end, copy that team and do well. We'll be doing weekly updates on this, so hopefully you can follow our progress along the way throughout the season. So again, happy to be here. And JRich, I'm going to let you take the lead on this momentous journey we're about to embark on. I hope we agree for the most part, but let's see.
Yeah, okay, so let's start with kind of the general strategy, right? We talked about going expensive keeper, cheaper on the defense. I have two questions for you to open this thing up, Tom, because two of our most divisive topics were two players. Erling Haaland, is he in the team, yes or no, at 15 mil? The last time that we did this show, he was down at 22% ownership, and now he is all the way up to 44%, only behind Ollie Watkins and Alexander-Isak. Tom, where are you at with Haaland? Is he a must-have in the team at 15 million?
Shall we just save everyone some time? Should we just put the big man in and don't look back? Is he going to be the top goal scorer this year? Probably. Are City going to win the league this year? Probably. Has he got minutes risk? Not really. Alvarez is left. Again, this isn't a dictatorship, so keen to see where your head's at with it, but I just don't want to watch Man City this season and not own Erling Haaland. It's going to be absolutely horrible, especially at 44% ownership. Obviously, if he blanks, he has a bad game, people are going to drop him. It's bad for us, but I just can't see the whole season him not just being as prolific as he can be. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think we can agree here. He's got to be in the team. And as difficult as it is for me to fit him in there with the other players I like, I am all aboard having him as one of our fixtures in the team. The other guy we talked about who actually had a pretty good performance this weekend was Trent Alexander-Arnold. You talked about what's his role going to be like under the new manager in Liverpool. He can get the clean sheets and had a phenomenal assist to Jota over the weekend. What are we doing with Trent? Are we going to fit him and Haaland in the team? Where's your head at with Trent right now?
Look at my guy doing his research. He already knows he's got an assist earlier today. I love that, even from 5 hours behind. Trent, for me, I think in my personal team, I'm locked in on having Trent. The thought of a clean sheet, assist, bonus, haul in the first game is going to hurt if I don't own him. I think they've got really, out of all the teams, especially in the top 6, they've got the first best 6 game weeks. So I can totally see him getting assists, getting goals, getting clean sheets. Obviously, it's far too early to make judgments, but initial impressions of slot systems look really positive. They look better defensively than the last couple of seasons. Trent picking up an assist earlier today, obviously, as you mentioned, bodes pretty well for him. At 7 million, he basically offers you quite a lot. So he gives you clean sheets, assists, goal opportunities. I think it's silly to overlook him, or at least for us not to consider putting him in our team if he's going to be a regular starter. At that 7 million price point, I don't think there's many more midfielders that are more creative in a better, point scoring potential than Trent, who, if he's going to play regularly, if you look at like his past seasons in FPL, he's always been one of the top assets to own if Liverpool are doing well. So I think a question for us is, do we think Liverpool can do well? And if yes, then I think Trent goes in there.
Yeah, so I think the hard part for me is that every team I've tried to build with Trent and Haaland is very difficult. But the good thing here is that I'm not alone. I can lean on you a little bit. So I'm all for it. If you want to put Trent in there, I think it's a very interesting build. It's going to be really unique. We have the highest price forward and the highest price defender. And so now it's, where do we go? We pretty much have to go cheap at keeper at this point. So if you were going to go this route with Trent and Haaland, you talked about Flekken was one of the guys you really liked, but even with him at 4.5, like, do you have to then go for a 4 million keeper behind him? Or can you afford, do you think, to have 9 million invested in your two keepers?
Yeah, I think as we're building out, maybe we don't think too much about budget. And then at the end, we can kind of cut back and make the savings in areas where we're not super, set on having that defender or midfielder. But I think goalkeeper, couple of initial reflections and probably a question actually back to you on what we spoke about previously. I'm starting to think, are we stupid if we have no Arsenal defenders or goalkeeper? They had last season, I think, clean sheet in 50% of games. Yes. Is it something that we're just overlooking? We'll regret a few games into the season when they've kept 4 out of 5 clean sheets. And we're like, that was easy points. And not many people seem to be going for these Arsenal assets. So is that a differential for us? Or do you kind of think, let's save the money? Like you say, we've got Trent in there, we've got Haaland. We're probably going to have to save on the money and then keep the midfielder forwards going like a little bit more attacking, a little bit more expensive. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that?
So I'm kind of with you, but I would almost take it the other way. And that's where, when I look at all the Arsenal defenders, right, and I can pull them up here right now, they're all in that, 6 mil range, right? So you have White at 6.5. Obviously, he can play down the wing as well, get assists. You have Gabriel that you mentioned is phenomenal on corners and in the box. And then Saliba, who's just an absolute unit in the middle. I think the only problem for me is, like, is there a world where that was their best season in terms of clean sheets, right? Like in recent memory. And you talked about how clean sheets are so hard to come by right now in the Prem because every single year scoring continues to go up. And why wouldn't that be the case for Arsenal as well? We love the roster. We know that those 3 guys are going to be staples in the team every single week. But I do think there's a world where, yes, they had a phenomenal year last year, but do we want to chase that points instead of going after the attackers that we know are probably going to produce for us when there could be some regression coming for some of those Arsenal defenders? I do think that Raya being at 5.5 is an interesting kind of like middle ground where you do save that, half mil, but you're still getting that Arsenal clean sheet potential. And then you just go super cheap at keeper, like we talked about when I was initially building my team. I had, Raya and Pickford. You're like, why would you do that? Just start Raya every week. So I don't think we have to go that route, but I think if I was going to bet on anyone, it would probably be Raya, simply because if the clean sheets come, great. But if they don't, I'm not getting hurt as much because I am saving a little bit of money. And every time I built a team, I'm always wishing I had that extra half mil, that extra mil. And to put an Arsenal defender in there is a little bit more expensive. So I think potentially we wouldn't want to go that route. But if there was a guy that you put in your lineup, which of the 3 top Arsenal defenders would it be?
It's a really tough one this year for Arsenal, and I think that's part of the reason people aren't picking them is Ben White is probably the best asset to own, but he's 6.5, so not many people are going to pick him. You want to pick a 6 million defender. The issue is Arsenal have made some signings in the defensive position, so Saliba's probably the most nailed, but he's not very attacking. He doesn't score goals, so if he plays, he gets 6 points. If they get a clean sheet, not much. Whereas Gabriel scores, quite a lot. He's involved. He has big threat. And I think for him, it's a question around rotation this year. If Arteta's brought new people in, do you want to spend 6 million on a defender that Arteta looks to rotate every few games, and you've got a Wolves at home fixture, or you've got Crystal Palace or someone, a really good home fixture for Arsenal, and he just rotates the squad because he's feeling more comfortable and they're playing well. That's something which I think, is it better just to own a 4.5 defender who's going to play week in, week out, and a potential to get you points? And I think if we're going to pick an Arsenal asset, I kind of agree with you that it's going to be Raya, plays every game, gets the clean sheets, and you save a bit of money. So I think if we're going to go with an Arsenal asset, it's Raya. but I'm also happy with a 4.5 million goalkeeper. As you know, I'm a fan of Flekken, Henderson from Brentford and Crystal Palace for clean sheet potential and saves. But I'm also not against having a Pickford, a Pope, even Alisson picked for this season if we think Liverpool are going to do really well. I want to hear what you think, but I'm not going to fight the goalkeeper position too much because I fear I'm going to need to fight my case a bit in the midfield and forward slots.
Yeah, so I'm fine going cheap pretty much all in the back line, right? From the defense and the goalkeepers, I'm fine cheaping out. That way we can invest in the forwards and midfield. It sounds like you're kind of leaning that way as well. So give me some cheap guys you'd want to put in there. Like Mykolenko is one that we've talked about on the show quite a bit. A guy we really like at 4.5. Barco is another one that he's probably end up making my team as well because he's another cheaper guy.
Yeah.
But I do really need to lean on you for the keeper. And would you spend that extra $500,000? Because the two guys you talked about were Flekken, who's probably going to end up being my keeper, as you can kind of already see right here. I had him in there earlier. But then would you go up to Henderson at 4.5, or would you go even cheaper potentially? Because that's the only question that I'm still struggling with is, yes, I have Flekken. That's great. You like him, and he's a great price. And then you have Henderson, who's also 4.5. But the guy that you told me to watch out for potentially is Fabinski on West Ham. Would you consider one of those two guys, or would you just pay up for Henderson because you like him?
I think what we do, and the reason that, so in my team, I've got Henderson at the minute, but the reason I'm considering Flekken more is you can have Flekken at 4.5. He plays every game for you. Brentford have really good defence. I think they were like 5th or 6th in the league last year for defence and conceding goals. They also concede a lot of goals, shots from outside the box. So I think their system suits like having a keeper in FPL. So that's kind of why, even if Brentford's fixture is a little bit harder than Henderson's initially, I kind of like just putting Flekken and just leaving him. If he scores points, great for us, but he's 4.5. He's going to make saves. I think it's better for us having a keeper that we don't, if they concede, we're like, oh, well, we kind of thought like that, rather than having someone like Raya where we're expecting them to, have a clean sheet and Zinchenko passes it back and then they fucking score or whatever, So I think for us, I think Flecken's a sensible option. And the other reason I really like Flekken, and this is quite rare for FPL, is they only have one other keeper and he's at 4 million. So we can put in his backup keeper. So if he's injured, they rotate him. We've got the option of the other Brentford keeper playing. So every week we know we're going to get the Brentford keeper playing. And we save that extra 0.5 from having Henderson in the second slot. And that's something that I really, really like this year.
That is a very interesting strategy, but doesn't it kind of concern you at all that maybe you're just too in on Brentford keeper? What's his name? I don't even know who the backup keeper is for Brentford.
Just search via Teams, go to Brentford, whack him in. I don't even know his name, but I know he's 4 million, and that's the most important point.
This guy.
Valdimarrison.
Perfect. He naturally named, right? Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so we got that's not bad. 8.5 at keeper. So who are the defenders you're targeting right now? Because I feel like once we get the defenders sorted out, then we can start arguing over who we want to put in as attackers, right? We got Mykolenko in there.
Yeah.
Barco was one you talked about for the bench more so than to start. But if our main three were Trent, Mykolenko, and then I know you like Konza as well, potentially for Villa. But who are some other guys? Like, because you did talk about Livramento for Newcastle. Obviously, Dan Burn is very highly owned right now at almost 20%. Who are the guys you'd be putting in there? Because I'm kind of fluid right now on the defenders. I'm just trying to find guys that are going to play and get me a couple points. I'm focusing all my energy on up front and in the midfield right now. So who are the guys that you've been looking at as potential options for your team?
I think if we want to go with your ethos of having lots of funds for up front, and if we want to have Haaland and fit Trent in, I think we need 2 4.0 defenders. Hopefully ones that are going to play. And I think it's Harwood from Southampton and Barco from Brighton are the two that I've got in my team. I think exactly. And I think we can have them as the backups and hope that our initial 3 defenders play every week.
Yeah, exactly.
The other player that I really like, as a Newcastle fan myself, is Lewis Hall. It's a bit of a contentious one because I had Livramento in my team initially, but I think if Trippier stays, there's a rotation risk there. And I'm a massive fan of Lewis Hall last year. Had a really strong end of season. And I've been toying between him and Livramento. He's got a great attacking threat. I think having watched our preseason games, he gets into the box a lot, especially for a defender. Touches in the box. He scored and assisted in preseason, and we've looked pretty. I think the last 2 games we've gone with a clean sheet when he's been playing. So I think you have attacking output. He can score, he can assist. and he can also get a clean sheet. And I think Newcastle, without Champions League European football this year, are going to have a much better defence, a much better system. And I think at 4.5 million, he's probably a bargain. The only slight concern for me, and interesting to hear your thoughts on this, is how much is he nailed to start every game? I think he's played the main preseason games, so he's expected to start. But if there's rotation and we've got, you've got Lloyd Kelly coming into Newcastle, potentially Gahey, does Dan Burn then slot into the left back spot? How much does Lewis Hall have that position locked down? I think he does, but it's maybe one for us to monitor as the season comes on. And maybe it's just one of our first transfers in the first couple of weeks. If he's not playing, we take him out. But I really like the punt on Lewis Hall. And if we can get in there early before people realise how good of an asset he can be for Newcastle, I think that helps us on the value side of things as well.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about Hall over a Burn, and especially Trippier, obviously much more expensive, is that he's the same price, right? So everyone is clearly going after Burn because he's probably going to play the most, but we know he doesn't have the most offensive upside, right? So if Hall's playing and in the lineup, or even if Livermento's in, they both offer much more in the attack, and we've seen that already in preseason. So I really like the play of Hall, and like you said, if he doesn't play, that's okay. We can always transfer him out. We have kind of our main three. And even some weeks we could throw Barco or Hardwood in there as guys that we know we're going to be playing, but not going to do a whole lot for us overall. So I do like the gamble on Hall, especially for, like you said, the upside. Now we're into the midfields. And where do you want to start with your midfield? Or do you want to start up top? Because I kind of feel like we can fairly confidently slot in Isak into the team, because I feel like we both want to have him in there almost no matter what. His ownership is insane, 55%. I believe it is the highest right now in FPL. He's definitely the highest forward. But where else would you want to go? I will pull up, all of the midfielders here because we don't have any on our team right now. You can see the list of all the most expensive guys. Who is the one that you can't help but put in your lineup right now, whether it's expensive or cheap?
Yeah. Midfield is a tough one this year. I think I want to start by apologising to you. Don't do it often, but I don't think you actually deserve to be laughed at when I saw your team last time and you had Declan Rice in it. I've been aware since that video that he's still on corners for Arsenal. He's been putting in some great deliveries. Obviously, you've got Gabriel. So I think there is a chance there. And we know the likes of Gabriel comes in with like a steam train, buries a lot of those chances. And if Rice has, got some creative potential, I kind of see where you're going with it. But so I do apologise, but he still gets nowhere near our team. So we can leave that where it is. So, I think the other thing which, since we last spoke, that may shock you is I'm fully off Salah. Like, I don't want him in my team.
Okay. So what changed for you then? Talk to me about that.
I just think I watched the Liverpool preseason game. He hugs the touchline incessantly. He's frustrating to own as a manager when you want him to get in behind. And he has been doing that a little bit more this season, but under Klopp last year, and I think he kind of resorted to that in the last game, is he's allowing a more creative role in building for the team so that a Jota, Luis Diaz, a Szoboszlai is getting in behind and scoring the goals, getting the assists. And I can see Liverpool winning a lot of games 4 and 5-0. I just don't see Salah scoring 2-3 consistently. He is on penalties though, so I can totally understand people going for him. But I think we can save some value there if we want Trent and Haaland in. I think that's going to be the key area where we save some. And I think it may just be me going crazy and sat looking at my phone and my FPL team being like, what can I change? What's going wrong? And I'm creating issues that aren't actually there. But I think for me, I'm good without Salah. I'm not good without Haaland. So I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm with you, right? Even with the penalty aspect, you can get every other guy. We can take Cole Palmer, who's going to take penalties. We could take Saka, who's going to take penalties, right? We talked about Bruno Fernandes, who's going to take penalties for Man United, and they're significantly cheaper. So that, $2 million at least price upgrade that we're playing. And I think even as well, right? You look at Ollie Watkins, if we wanted to go with like a massive 3-forward build, that'd be another way we could get a lot cheaper than having Salah on the team. And we know how great he was last year. Fully expect him to do the same thing this year. I'm with you. I'm in on fading Salah, but we do have to get some guys in the team. So who are the guys that we want in the team right now? But I am with you. Like, Salah's a guy that I've looked at it. I've tried to make it happen. It's not happening, especially with Trent and Haaland. We have to find ways to get different and get a little bit cheaper. So my first question is there any forwards you would consider outside of Watkins going with a 3-striker build? We talked about going more the 3-5-2 in terms of the lineup and how we'd probably play weekly. And then so we have to really make sure not just we have strong midfield across, but we're not stretched too thin or have guys who are going to be in and out of the lineup too much if we're mainly playing a 2-striker, 5 midfield build.
Yeah.
But who are the guys that you think could maybe save us some money? Because we've talked about Nkunku is the main one. I feel like, I forget who the midfielder is that you talked about, but he's in my lineup now, the guy who's 6'5". And I think there's but Nkunku is the one that I struggle with only because Chelsea seems like they're going to be so inconsistent with their lineups.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Look at us. Who would have thought it? Lots of agreement going on. And leaving the Egyptian king out, I think it's going to be bold for our team, but I think it's going to be really, really good for us for saving the value. I kind of agree on Nkunku as well. Even more agreement, but I have him in my team at the minute, and I think he's undervalued at 6.5. And if he explodes, what a value player at that price point. But I think for our team, if we're saving value in Salah, I think we've got to bring in players that we know are going to play every week, are going to be talismanic for their team, are going to be the key person for getting points from that team. And I think you mentioned Fernandes. I really like him in the team with like his creativity. He's just signed a new contract today. Yep. I think Ten Hag can only go up from here. I think United are only going to be playing better. Garnacho looks good. Bruno Fernandes assisted him in the Community Shield against Man City. I just think he's on pens as well. I think he's a really good option. So I don't mind putting him in here for now, and then later we can maybe take him out. I'm trying to think who else we really like. You mentioned Palmer, and I keep going backwards and forwards on Palmer. Yeah, exactly. He's at a tough price point at 10.5. He obviously had a great season last season, but a lot of his goals were penalties. And I don't see Chelsea being, like you mentioned the rotation, it doesn't seem like they've locked down a 11. I don't think there's as much consistency. I would err away from having too many Chelsea assets this year.
Yeah, that's my fear, right? Is that if you go with Palmer and Nkunku, you're probably going to have a bust every single week, right? Because one of them probably is going to do anything. And if you do pay up for Palmer, which, again, to be fair, probably the only guy you trust to be in the lineup every week. I believe he played 54 or 34 games last season, which was like one of the highest of all of the main attackers in FPL last year. And so you look at what you could do. I'm fine with Nkunku because we do have to find ways to save money somewhere, right? And if you want to fade Palmer, then it may allow us to get some of those guys that are between 7.5 and 9.5. We could even try and go up to Saka if we want, especially because his early schedule is good. But I do like having Fernandes in there. Let's try and build one with Nkunku in there because we do have to find some value somewhere. And then I think going back to your man in Gibbs-White, it just seems like he's going to be in my team. When I look at the price points for all the players, he seems to fit what I want to do really well. And especially when you're trying to fit an Erling Haaland in there and have Trent in there, we still have to fit 3 spots and we have 22.5 million, which is not bad, but it's going to deplete quickly when we're planning on starting 5 midfielders almost every single week.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you click the eye in the top right of Gibbs-White, you can kind of see his stats from the last couple of seasons. He's been consistent. If you look at his history there, he's got 5 goals scored and 12 assists in the 2 seasons he's played in the Prem, pretty much from starting for Nottingham Forest. And I think you can only see him building on that. Now he's like a Premier League starter. You see him in every game. He's on penalties for Nottingham Forest. I think Nottingham Forest are making good signings, playing better football. They kind of established themselves now in the Premier League. I only see him doing better this year. And I think at 6.5 million, it doesn't hurt to have a lower down team having one of their best players that's involved in most of their goals. And look at the first 3 fixtures there that they've got is, I think, Bournemouth at home, first game, then Southampton, then Wolves at home as well.
All solid matchups, right?
All solid. So it's like, if he is, and then it's very easy to like drop him if we think he's not going to be good. There's lots of people at that price point or even lower that I think I like as well. You've got Rodgers from Villa at 5 million. You've got Smith Rowe just gone to Fulham for 5.5 million. So I think there is other options if we want to like pivot sideways from Gibbs-White, but I do really like him. So I'm happy with that. The one thing that I want to get your opinion on is Bukayo Saka, obviously Arsenal's star boy. He's not in my draft at the minute, and he's not in many people's. Well, I guess he's in 26% of teams, so he's the 5th most owned midfielder. He obviously, I think if we look at his stats from last season as well, he did really, really well. He does well in every year for FPL. 16 goals scored, 12 assists. It's just like 226 points last year. Obviously, Arsenal had a great season, but even in the couple of years before, he's up between 180 and 220. So if we say he gets 200 points this season, I kind of like him as a point, like just from a stats perspective. He's going to be on pens for Arsenal. They're probably going to be playing good football again. They've got semi-good fixtures at the start. And then it gets a little more difficult when they're playing City. I think they play Newcastle as well. I think they play Chelsea. So I think the one thing and the reason we kind of stay away from the defenders was that some of the fixtures initially are quite tough. Yeah, Spurs away, City away in 4 and 5. But then they've got a nice run of 3. But then it's Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea. So it's kind of like a bit up and down. But you can imagine in those games, you look at it and you say Liverpool at home, oh, tough game. But you can see that being 2-2, 3-3 and Saka scoring. Yeah. So, like, you have the benefit of having a Leicester at home, a Southampton home, a Bournemouth away, and then a Liverpool home. I don't necessarily think that's a bad fixture for him. So I'm thinking if we're not going Salah, I actually quite like the idea of having Saka in this team.
So, yeah, we've kind of talked about how we're probably going to stick away from 2 Chelsea players. It seems like we're kind of not set on Nkunku right now, but I'm fine kind of differentiating and not going with Palmer and taking Saka. We do save 0.5 mil. And we're getting a player that probably has a similar ceiling. Hopefully he can stay really healthy, because I feel like with Saka, the biggest issue has been he's always been a little bit banged up and he hasn't stayed healthy for a full season. And if he did, I think he would absolutely smash, right? And as you mentioned, you're saving 2.5 mil compared to Salah. And I think they do have similar outcomes, especially if, like you're saying, Salah is a guy who's going to be more on the sideline, not doing enough in the middle. And I think Saka's assist potential is extremely high on Arsenal, right? They're always putting out a lot of pressure. We saw how great he was in the Euros, and I think he can only continue to do that, plus a lot of goal scoring potential on Arsenal. So now you look at our team, we have 12.5 mil, Tom, to round out the rest of this team. But I think we're in a pretty good spot. I don't know if we're perfect just yet, but who's the next guy you fit? Would you, because I think the one question I do want to ask you is the forwards, right? There's not a lot of cheap forwards. You don't really want to cheap out on forward. You could talk about Solanke, who just came into Bournemouth. You know, we talked about João Pedro and how he's kind of like the main cheap guy everyone is putting on their teams because he's going to play and he's very, very inexpensive. But is there anyone else that could maybe allow us to have, you know, an 8 mil, or like Eze could probably fit in this team pretty easily, but is there anyone that we could put in here to where it would make sense, they're going to play, and we can still run that 3-5-2 like we've been talking about?
Yeah. I think we don't necessarily need to be wedded to the 3-5-2. I guess the things that we want to think about the forwards here is, if you look at those down the right-hand side, Watkins is the best option, but he is 9 million. So I think if we want to run a 3-4-3, I think we want someone, we either go with Watkins and we play him every week regardless. We set and forget him. 10 weeks down the line, he's probably scored about between 5 and 10 goals. And I think that's fine. Solanke obviously just signed for Spurs recently. So I think a lot of people are putting him in, but I don't know if Ange is going to start him from game week 1. Yeah. As well as uncertainty around, like, a lot of people had Son in thinking he's going to play the central role, or he's more prolific when he's like, you know, being able to not have an out-and-out striker ahead of him. Now they've signed Solanke. There's Richarlison, there's Brennan Johnson. I don't think Son's going to be as prolific, and especially for however much he is at. And I think that's reflected in his ownership.
Yeah, 10 mil.
João Pedro is a really interesting one, and it's kind of one that I'd stopped thinking about him. He's not even considered in my draft, but I do really like him, and I get the sentiment behind him being he's 5.5 million. He's probably going to start for Brighton. It's probably worth us checking that he's been playing pre-season. But at 5.5 million, if he's playing in a Brighton team that I think are going to be pretty attacking as they normally are, I think he's going to be, the issue was he wasn't that fit last season. He was kind of in and out of the team. If he's playing every game and he's on penalties in a good Brighton team at 5.5 million, it allows us to have more flexibility in the midfield. And then we can go for the option or the strategy of rotating. Maybe some weeks we don't play him. Like he has a game against Arsenal, we don't play him, we play a midfielder instead. But I think game week 4, game week 5, Ipswich at home, Nottingham Forest at home, you would play him and he'd probably score. Even Man United at home in game week 2, I don't hate playing him there. So it's like, it gives you the option of maybe we go with like a rotational squad and we're not super reliant on a starting 11. Equally, we could just go for like a Watkins and then make the team around to fit him in.
Yeah, like I think the thing about Pedro that's interesting and why I love Brighton is like they're the team that gets into a lot of these 3-2 games or 4-3 games. And, next thing you know, they get on the counterattack, a player like Pedro's running, and all of a sudden the game is flipped on its head. That's just the way Brighton plays and why I love having their attackers, not so much for their defenders because they will still concede goals, but having a player like Pedro at 5.5, I see why his ownership is so much higher. We could try putting him in, but then we're looking at 7 mil. And I think for the midfielders, we've kind of talked about it a lot. that's really that Eze range where we're probably going to take Eze. We can't fit Bowen in there. We can't fit. If you want to go down to Rashford, you could. That's certainly a decision, but I wouldn't go there either. But that's where I like.
Where's that soundboard, JRich? Exactly.
Marcus Rashford probably not making the team, especially for us. But let's look at Watkins, because I think that Watkins is the one that intrigues me probably the most, and how we go about it. Because the only way I see it right now, if we wanted to go with this 3-4-3, we're probably going to have to take down Nkunku or Gibbs-White. I think we kind of prefer Gibbs-White over Nkunku, and then go with someone super cheap at 4 mil, and then someone a little bit better to kind of bolster that team. So what are the options you'd be looking at for that? Because I obviously love the attack. Defense is good. We're pretty set with the Brentford keepers, and we're good that way. But it's so difficult for me to pick a midfielder in this range that we are comfortable with, because we will have to go down from Nkunku, but then we also need someone else that can kind of fill that spot as well. And then the biggest problem is this is when you go from Trent to a cheaper defender, so you can actually put a decent midfielder in the lineup. But we got Trent in there. We're trying to build around Trent. And then even potentially Bruno Fernandes can be another one that we downgrade a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think as well, what I was just checking with the budget we have left is if we had 7.5 and we could get Anthony Gordon in there, or we could get Gordon instead of Nkunku and have a cheap defender, a cheap midfielder and Watkins, but it's just not going to work that way. What's your thoughts on having Watkins? Do we definitely need him? Is it just we think Aston Villa are going to do really well? If you think he's going to score goals, I don't mind just keeping him in there and just smashing it. Equally, we could go with a 3-5-2 and put Gordon in there instead of Nkunku. We can look at maybe upgrading him or keeping him at the same level and having Watkins out and play a 3-5-2. It's a tough one. This is where I think it's going to get a little bit dicey for our team. We're feeling pretty confident in Haaland, Isak. The rest of it's kind of coming shape together. And I think I don't want to take out Fernandes and I don't want to take out Saka. They're the two in the midfield that I think they're going to play every game. At the home games, we're expecting them to score, assist, or do well. I think we leave them where they are. Nkunku and Gibbs-White, I'm happy to take out and kind of make it work. But I guess the question I'm trying to ask you is Watkins a no-brainer for us? Do you want him in? And in which case, should we build around him? Or are you not wed to the fact of having him in the team?
I really want to have him on the team, but I think the problem for me is I just prefer to have Isak compared to Watkins. We could build a team where it's Haaland and Watkins, right? And maybe that's our build. But I think what I love is the upside of Trent, right? Trent, if he hits, is probably the highest upside player at his price point that we're going to find. It's very difficult to make it happen. But I think if we're trying to build a team that's a little bit different, if you have Trent, Watkins, Haaland, Isak, and Saka in a team, it will be different, but it's just so difficult. We're already stretched too thin. We only have 3.5 mil. Even if we do have Nkunku here, it's still at the point where we're almost going to be starting 4 defenders because we just don't have enough money to go around. I think that the Watkins build isn't really going to work, and I feel like we almost have to go with Pedro. And this is where I land a lot when I'm building my teams. I had Pedro in there already. I think if you put him back in, all of a sudden you have that 7 mil, and that's where I land on a player like Eze, and I'm like, boom, I have my 5 midfielders, I have my 3 defense, I have 2 strong attackers. It's really just comes down to do you like Nkunku and Gibbs-White? The one player I did want to ask you about is Harry Winks here, because he is surprisingly highly owned. Didn't play a ton last year, but do you expect him to play more? And at 4.5 mil, could he be a guy where we take him, see what he does, and then we go up even higher to an Anthony Gordon? And we probably could even go even higher than that at our last midfielder spot. Yeah.
I think Harry Winks is in a lot of teams just to fill the last spot if they're playing a 3-4-3. So they just got him in. They know he's going to play, he's get appearance points. If one of your players gets injured or doesn't play, he'll get subbed on. He has points, but you're not going to start him every week. So I think if we were going to go with Watkins, we'd have to look at Winks or another 4.5 mid. I like Lavia from Chelsea if you're looking just to fill in that last spot. But I think if we're not going with Watkins, I'd be semi-tempted to downgrade João Pedro to a 4.5 midfielder and let's commit to a 3-5-2 and just say we're not going to rotate João Pedro unless you want to do that strategy. I'm kind of thinking we take out João Pedro, we put in a 4.5 mid. It can just be anyone. We don't know who's going to play really. maybe like, I think there's a Wolves 4.5. Maybe if you do the max cost
Fraser
of
guy?
15. Yeah, maybe Fraser's just, if you put that down to 4.5, let's see who people are. Yeah, Fraser is the most owned. I don't think any of these players are necessarily going to play, but I think maybe we just put in Fraser for now. Yeah,
Yeah, I
7
mean,
minutes. Is that
hardly
7 points?
played, hardly played ever. So,
Lost
and first
that.
week
Yeah.
Arsenal, great. Like, we're definitely not playing him for that matchup. We could put him in and just kind of see what happens, right? And then we still have $1 million, which is good. But then where would you want to spend that $1 million in the midfield?
I think Nkunku to Gordon is just such a value add. I think Gordon's going to play really well this season. I think he's going to build on the momentum Newcastle had last season at the end of the season. He plays really well. He's just come back from the Euros where he's probably been a little bit frustrated and got a point to prove. He scored in pre-season yesterday. He's looking fit, strong. And I think if Newcastle are looking to do well this year, a lot will come through Isak and Gordon. And I think at 7.5 million, I can't remember, maybe click the eye in the top right. I think he got double digits goals and assists last season. One of only like a few players that have ever done that in the Premier League. So I think at 7.5 million and 183 points, which is kind of like the lower end of the Saka band that we're expecting, for 2.5 million cheaper than Saka and 5 million cheaper than Salah, it feels like a no-brainer to have someone in if they've got, relatively good fixtures at the start as well. So I think your uncertainty point around Nkunku is really valid as well, and a lot of people are going to have him in. But if he doesn't start, or he plays, they manage his minutes and plays 50 minutes against City in the first game, gets subbed off, I can see lot of people, no points, and I see a lot of people getting rid of him, and you're looking at maybe a price decrease, which is only going to trouble your team, and then you've made a transfer in game week 2 to try and put out a fire, whereas Anthony Gordon's going to play every game. He's probably going to score or assist in a lot of these. For me, I kind of like downgrading João Pedro and upgrading Nkunku to Gordon.
Yeah, and so that was the other thing I wanted to ask you about, is I knew you liked Gibbs-White. I knew you were iffy on Nkunku, but there also is the world where you could kind of play them both, right? You could switch them week in and week out. We talked about Hall. He seems to be our main sub right now if we were to make a switch week 1 or going into week 2. But there is the world where, you could alternate between Gibbs-White and Nkunku as long as everything else kind of stays all square. I think we're both pretty happy if we have Gibbs-White in there for like a decent stretch because his fixtures are pretty good. And we expect him to do well, right? You look at these fixtures off the rip. First 10 games, only 2 bad matchups, a lot of positives, a lot of goal potential. So I really like what he can offer for us. And then if Nkunku does do well early on, or we feel like he's going to do well, we can always make that switch. On top of that, this is where I really needed your assistance because I did not know who to put in at 4-5 for the last forward, right? When we're talking about the 2-striker build, I'm like, I have no clue if any of these guys play. We saw 7 points last season for Fraser, but I really like what we've done here. This midfield with Fernandes and Eze, Saka, Gordon, Gibbs-White, like it's really, really strong. We spent all of our money, but is there anything else you want to explore? Because I think we're pretty much set on the team. We like what we've done so far, but is there anything you would change with this team right now or you want to explore?
I guess, firstly, let's click make transfers and let's look at the team in the actual positions and let's see. That's pretty much our lineup. So you can ignore the bench. We've gone for the cheapest options in every position. We're not expecting any of them to play. We're hoping just our 11 up front to, get the points for us. If you look at that on paper, we've got a pretty strong defense overall, I would say. Pretty balanced because we've got Trent, 2 4.5s. We know Brentford are going to do well with Flekken, hopefully. In the midfield, we look like we've got players who are going to be playing in teams that are super attacking, are going to be playing well, are going to be playing every single game. I think Saka, Gibbs-White and Fernandes, even Gordon are probably like the main point that everything goes through in one of those teams. And you expect, if you see that team 2-0 up, you kind of click on it expecting them to be involved in some way in that goal, whether it's an assist or a goal. Haaland and Isak is a no-brainer. I love that attack. It's just like set and forget. We don't have to change our attack, really, unless we want to bring in a Watkins. And it's only Watkins or Solanke that I've kind of got my eyes on in that third striker spot for us. But I think Solanke, it's too early to tell. He's at a good price point for a Spurs attacker. And if they start playing good football and he scores, I'd be semi-tempted to put consider changing Eze to a Solanke and maybe downgrading someone else to fit him in. I don't hate that. But I think it's too early. And with a lot of summer transfers, people tend to bring them in expecting them to play, but I can see them slowly being eased into the team. Imagine I can't imagine Richarlison's going to be too happy if game week 1 he's not starting striker and they don't ease Solanke in for the last 30 minutes and they slowly switch it around by game week 2, 3, 4. So I just think it's too early to go on Solanke. It's one that we will continue to monitor. I love Haaland and Isak. And then I guess the only thing looking at that team, the only two positions that I'm not too sure about is Mykolenko. Is there a 4.5 defender that we think is going to be a better option than him? And Eze as well, I think. Is there another seven mid or lower that we think is going to be a really good option that we could also consider? So I think they're probably the two, just looking at it from that perspective. Maybe we look at the defenders for own for 4.5 and we could run through and see. And one which I've been seeing, and that was actually in your initial draft, which I really loved, was Robinson. I know you only know him through FIFA, but I think he's a really good option. I'm seeing him in a lot of teams, and if we expect Fulham to do well, you see how many points he got last season. Maybe if we look at percentage ownership as well for the 4.5s, and we kind of see, like, are people thinking the same?
Fixtures are good as well, right?
Let's have a look. People going for Anderson from Crystal Palace, which I don't hate. Robinson's down there at 6%. Gahey will be, we think he's signing for Newcastle, so I don't. And I think he won't initially, like Eddie Howe likes easing players into the team. I don't think he's initially going to start and upset the system. Konsa I did really like because he's guaranteed to play in a Villa defence, and I think Emery has a really good system. But again, there's not much attacking output. You're kind of, for me, it's between Mykolenko and Konsa. If we just want to set a player who's going to play in a relatively decent defence. I know Sean Dycheball over here, we kind of call it Brexit football. But, they get the clean sheets quite often. So if we were going to go Mykolenko or Konsa, I kind of feel like Villa may struggle with the back of last season, a lot of injuries and a lot of games in the European football and things like that. I think it's probably safer to go for Mykolenko, but I don't hate going for Robinson if we want to take more of a punt, and especially a more attacking player like Robinson as opposed to Mykolenko, who's just for the clean sheet. I think he's not a bad option. And also Castagna as well for Fulham. If we want one of the Fulham defenders, I think both of them are pretty good options.
Yeah, for me, Robinson was one that I know that he does have that attacking prowess to his game, right? We kind of see that whether he's playing for the U.S. team or even for Fulham. It's, for me, the hardest part is just knowing, is it going to be enough, right? Will he be able to overcome when they can see goals and all that kind of stuff? Does Mykolenko have better clean sheet potential? Should we lean on the clean sheet side over the offensive side? But I do like the idea of just being a little bit more different, right? Like, you're getting half the ownership on Robinson. And I think the other thing that's a big point here is we could move these guys around, right? While Hall's kind of like our main guy, we can move around. All these guys in the 4 or 5 range, depending on their fixtures, depending on what's going on, we can move them around and swap them in and out depending on how they do. So it is very interesting from that perspective. We have all these defenders that are in that 4 or 5 range, and maybe there's a guy at the 4 million range that we want to put in the team. I'm fine with leaving Mykolenko in there right now. He was kind of the guy that I pegged early on as one that I was probably going to have in my team. But I do like the idea of getting different with Robinson. So for this team, let's put Robinson in there because, again, I have my team. I'm building it out. It's not finalized, but I like this is a little bit different than what I've been doing. And so I like putting Robinson in there to see what we could get out of a slightly different team than we're already been building.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what it comes down to is if we want to go slightly different, maybe we either go with, Anderson is the top-owned defender. I'm not sure what Crystal Palace's fixtures are like at the top. If they got Brentford away, West Ham at home, they're not fantastic. So I don't like Anderson as a pick for defender. I do like Robinson. And who else? I think for us,
the schedule for Robinson is very good, right? You see one difficult game, City away, and that's pretty much it. So from that standpoint, it does look pretty good to start with him and just see how it goes, right? But I don't know if there's anybody else you wanted to take a look at while we're here.
I'd be interested to see on Robinson's just output last season. If you click the iron next to his name, hopefully we can see he got 6 assists last season, which is pretty good for like involvement from goals, and probably like another season in the Prem, starting to build on it. I don't hate it. So I actually quite like that in terms of if Fulham they've got decent fixtures, if they start to play good football and keep clean sheets, and he has attacking potential as well, maybe that's something better than Mykolenko. I think Mykolenko's fixtures are also pretty good.
Yeah, once he gets through the first 4, right?
After 2 and 4, I think that's a defender that you don't really need to think about, and you kind of play him every game. So that was the reason that I think a lot of teams are thinking about Mykolenko, and that's why he was in one of my initial drafts, is you kind of just set him and forget about it. If he gets you points, amazing, bonus. So you kind of save the value there elsewhere for the likes of Saka, Haaland, etc. to get you the points. So it's more of like an enabler player. So yeah, I don't hate Robinson. I don't hate Mykolenko. I'm happy to leave this down to you. It's your first season FPL, so let it rain on your shoulders. And when they do badly, I can blame you.
I'm fine with leaving Robinson for now. I think it's an interesting tweak to the team that we already had. And I think that Mykolenko is probably going to be in my main team, like my individual team. So I like having Robinson there. And like you mentioned, the fixtures are still pretty solid. He does have that attacking prowess. So I do like that. I absolutely love the midfield. I love up top. I like that we got Trent in there because I don't know if I'm going to have Trent in my main team. I know that you said you probably will. So I think we're good set on this. But Tom, how do you feel about the team? Do you have any final thoughts? Is there anything you want to say before we get out of here?
I have to say, that was pretty seamless. I'm pretty happy with what we put out there. I think we've got a good defense. It's pretty balanced. I think the midfield got a couple more expensive ones in Saka and Fernandes. We've got a couple enabler ones a bit cheaper. We've got a lot of potential to move between those price points as well. If there's other players that start to do well, like a Smith Rowe or Rodgers, and we want to move around. The only player that I don't think we can move to is probably a Salah without taking Haaland out, but we've kind of committed to no Salah. So I think in terms of like if people are doing well, we've got potential to move to them. I also think we've got really good players in here that at the start of the season, we're going to feel comfortable with at least our rationale of thinking, even if they do badly, we pick Saka. He doesn't do as well, but the likelihood is that he will. So I'm feeling pretty confident about this. I also think it's a really good template team for those of you that are struggling with FPL. Maybe start with this team on your page and work backwards and try and fit in other players that you like, and you've got the base of like a really good solid team for the start of the season.
Yeah, I think we hit on a lot of good points here with this team. And we didn't just talk through, obviously, this one roster. We talked about all different options. We laid out the cases for each player. And I think when you start from, who are the main guys? We wanted to have Haaland in the team. We wanted to, build a team with Trent in it because we just know the upside is there on Liverpool. And, we went with the strategy of the cheaper keepers, and we went with actually the team stack there. And that strong midfield is that's the hardest part, is when you know where you need to save money and you make that happen, but then you have to figure out the right blend of players. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm happy we don't have Nkunku in there because he was making me a little bit nervous. Even though you had him in a lot of your teams and a lot of your builds, I was like, I just don't know if I trust that many Chelsea players outside of Palmer. And so I'm glad we had that. And then obviously the big man up top, Erling Haaland, Isak, it's phenomenal. So I'm very excited what we have. I can't wait to get this one rolling and continue to build it out with the transfers. I'm excited for Lewis Hall as well. I think he's a really savvy pick, and I may have to look to getting him in some of my teams because he's someone who's very underowned. And as you mentioned, yes, we can move around at that 4 or 5 price point, but if we already have him, we may be able to get him before some other people do. So very excited for that. Very happy with the team that we built out. Hopefully everyone got something out of this. Tom, do you want to say anything to the people before we head out of here?
I want to say absolutely nothing. I'm happy with the team. Copy it. It's all good. It was a pleasure with you, JRich, as always. Not enough soundboard action, but maybe one to build on next time. But yeah, no, really enjoyed that and looking forward to our season together.
Yeah, once Trent just absolutely destroys, we'll be all over the soundboard. So don't worry. I'll have some stuff loaded. I'm excited for it. But thank you to everybody for tuning in. We'll be back probably not before the season starts, but you never know. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode of our FPL podcast, and we'll see you guys next week. We're out. Peace.